Morning, Lisa. It's so nice to see you.
It's good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'm incredibly pleased to be joined this morning for one of our conversations about COVID and about the changing nature of work with Lisa Durocher, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Rogers. We're so happy to speak to you, not only because of your leadership role in the technology space, but also because Rogers has been a wonderful national supporter of Actua's programming, specifically to engage underserved audiences across the country since 2017. So really happy to have the chance to speak with you this morning.
Excellent. I'm very, very pleased to be here. And I am passionate about this topic, women in STEM. And, I look forward to talking about some of the things we've done in COVID because it's been a really challenging time.
Agreed. So let's get right into it. And first, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your journey and yourself, and how did you come to be the Chief Digital Officer at Rogers?
So it's interesting. I feel like many people in my position didn't go to school to do this because 30 years ago, there was no job that was called Chief Digital Officer anywhere.
Right.
And so I think it's been interesting. It's been a little synchronicity. I started my career at Procter & Gamble, and so was a packaged goods marketing person in brand management. And I think really learned about how to put the customer first and understand the customer and build around the customer. I then actually moved to France for a while and took a year off, and then came back and worked for 15 years for American Express in the US, really in a variety of different roles, from prepaid to digital payments to business travel to consumer travel. I did a little bit of everything. It was fascinating. That business is a very diverse business. And I lived 15 years in the US working at Amex. And then 4 years ago, came home for personal reasons because I'd been away from my family for so long, and thought for sure I'll end up working for a bank because 15 years at Amex, that's the likely place to end up. But somehow ended up joining digital at Rogers. And it, again, was just sort of the combination of things that I've done over my life have been about the customer, about product, and about digital. And those things added up to position me well for this role.
That's fantastic. And Rogers, of course, is a top leader in the digital space in Canada,
Yes.
and has been in the digital space. But how has Rogers' digital strategy changed in response to COVID-19? What are some of the things that your team specifically has been working on to really better serve the needs of Canadians, which has really changed for all of us
Right.
at this time? But some of the things that you've been working on?
Well, there's no question that what Rogers does has never mattered more to Canadians than it does right now, because it is literally the way that we're staying connected with family, with friends, and able to do our jobs. So I think it's been a bit of a journey. I think when I came 4 years ago, we really said there were 4 priorities for Rogers Digital. One is build better self-serve capabilities so that our customers can do more for themselves and on their own time. Build better tools for our frontline agents so that they can be more efficient and frankly connected, because our customers don't want to experience us as a bunch of channels. They want to experience us as one company. A third piece was really building the foundation so that we could be more nimble, more agile, and have better technology that just made everything work better. And a lot of that was sort of moving us into the cloud and away from some of the legacy ways of working. And then the final strategy was really working on how do we bring digital ways of working to the company, right? How do we transform the way we work together? That foundation let us be ready for COVID. So there's no playbook for COVID, but if we hadn't done the work of those 4 years, we wouldn't have been able to do the things that we did during COVID, whether that was setting up COVID hubs in 2 days, right? We rebuilt all the information for the company, for every brand, uniquely in a few days over the end of a week and over a weekend. We were able to pivot to enable self-install for people buying broadband so that a couple of weeks after we started, we stopped having to have technicians go into the house because it was safer for our customers and safer for the technicians. We also had made a strategic investment to provide a service called Pro on the Go, which is actually a service where you can buy your phone online or call us, and we bring it to your house and we set it up for you. And that started to be something that we facilitated, through the window, sitting on the front porch, or, as the weather warmed up a bit, sitting out on the back deck. But really, more and more services that meant you didn't have to go to a store, you didn't have to let somebody in your house. We really had options that we could enable digitally to coach people through things, to let them do it themselves and stay safe.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I found fascinating in preparing to talk to you today is I saw the data that came out about Canadians' view and trust in the telecommunications industry has increased dramatically from 52 to I think 71%, which that I thought that was incredible, because it's really driving that trust is needed for the innovation to happen, right? So if the society or people in general are not trusting, then those innovations aren't going to move as quickly. So I find this so inspiring. It brings so much optimism, because there's been so much doom and gloom and so much about the negative impacts. And of course, that is much needed narrative and discussion. But I love now really amplifying some of these positive stories of innovation that we couldn't have done without the pressure of COVID.
I completely agree. I mean, there's so many things that I think strategically we advanced multiple years in months, because we were really forced to deal with things. And there's always a little bit of inertia. Our customers really ready, and they are really ready. They're ready to do a lot of these things. I think it's also been a time that we've rebuilt trust, because we've really been on a journey to focus much more on the customer and put the customer first. And I think that was reflected in a lot of things we were able to do. If we had to stand up Pro on the Go, we didn't already have a year's experience with it, we wouldn't have been able to, right? So it was that foundation of customer experience and that foundation of some of the service that we're putting in place, I think, was something we could lean on, as well as we head into 5G, the fact we've really invested in our 5G networks and are, in fact, I think, poised to by far have the biggest 5G network as the iPhone launches in a few weeks. So.
And talk about some of the efforts that Rogers has made, because I know you've done a lot in this space in this era of the pandemic. Like in particular for communities that are lacking support for online accessibility. We know that a lot of communities in Canada are in that situation, but Rogers has done more even than before to support that. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest initiatives we had was partnering with school boards in Manitoba, in Ontario, and in BC, and leveraging our relationship with Apple to really get more devices in the hands of more students so that they could learn safely from home. Because as we moved to homeschooling, there are households that had some of that in place, and there are lots that didn't. And if you don't have an iPad, or you don't have a device that's going to let you connect with your teacher and the rest of your class, you're really shut out from that experience. I think another big piece is we supported the Canada Learning Code, Junior Achievement, and of course, you awesome folks at Actua, with helping build awareness of some of the virtual programs that you have for kids in STEM who are interested in sort of coding, entrepreneurship, financial responsibility, and helping get that story out there, that there were virtual ways of continuing to interact with those services even during COVID. And in fact, if anything, that career path, that STEM career path, I think is going to become more and more relevant, because suddenly being the person who can help others connect through technology is becoming a very important career to be a part of.
Exactly. And this is where we have we're always grateful for the support of companies like Rogers, but it's been absolutely critical through this period for us to maintain support to develop those skills in youth who are struggling with connectivity, and we can still build their technical skills while we work on getting them more connected, while we work on getting them the support that they need. So it's been, as you said, really critical. One of the things that you have talked about a couple of times just in this conversation has been that need to understand the end user experience. And that is so, we think about that in the way that we engage youth with digital skills, that it is so much more than just the technical skills.
Yeah.
Involved in being in a technology field. So I wonder if you could just talk about, expand on that and tell us about the diversity of skills that you're seeing or that you're needing in your digital team. Obviously going beyond just those tech skills, but what are some of the other skills that you're finding are just absolutely critical?
I think digital is sort of the convergence of a number of skills if you're doing it right. So obviously you have to understand the technology, which is a core foundational piece, but it's equally important, as you were just saying, to understand the customer, because you only build good technology if you understand the problem that you're solving and you can really apply it in a way that is intuitive for the customer. A third piece is we really also need to understand the business and the business objectives. And so helping the business to achieve its end goals as well is critically important. And then I think the fourth one is really collaboration, because I quite often say in digital we do nothing alone, right? I work with IT, I work with the business itself, I work with legal, I work with the front line, right? And we have to understand everything we build. How does it touch all those constituents, and how do we bring them together against a single vision that is the right one for the customer, the right one for the company, and the right one for the shareholder? And so it is a really high bar, I think, to be in this space, because you have to be able to master all of those four things and bring them together to deliver results.
I think that's such a key point, that there isn't enough narrative around. So I'm so happy that that's part of the way that you speak about this, and in the thought leadership work that you do around this topic, is that the technology doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I think a lot of the fear around, automation is from that, is that people don't realize that it's not going to go anywhere if we're not also human centered, and we're not recognizing that end user need and what the bigger picture is. And for us, like, we talk a lot in our STEM programs about empathy building.
Yeah.
And how do you, because empathy, people often think of as empathy as it is a very personal, social importance, value, and skill, but it is also a very important skill for the future of work, because it really, again, we need that to drive innovation. So I'm thrilled that that's how you talk about it, and certainly that's reflected in how Rogers has pivoted during this time, and how it's out in the world. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
I also want to talk further about that in terms of leadership and how you're leading, certainly as a female in a very male-dominated field of digital and tech. You have important insights into what the future holds, both in tech, but also for the important role that women are going to play in these careers that have historically been very male dominated. We do a lot of work, as you know, at Actua on engaging girls and young women, and one of the things we know is super important is that they can actually see themselves reflected in science and technology, that they feel that it's a place for them, that they will have space there to be themselves and to excel. Could you talk about your own, in that vein, could you talk about your own experience in this field, and what contributed to your sense of belonging, or how have you built that, both for yourself and now for others coming behind you?
I think it's a couple things. One is I think I have always focused on my ability to learn. And in this space, that's been so critical, because, as I said, this the jobs that of the people that I lead now didn't exist when I started working. And so it was really always being curious and frankly, always saying yes to every opportunity that came up. So, I started my career, as I said, in packaged goods, and it was a great foundation because it really was a lot of general management skills. It was a lot of understanding the customer skills. And a lot of people that started their career that way kind of stayed in that and became CMOs. Like lots of folks that I started with, that's what they do today. But I found that as I went on, I always kind of asked myself, is the next thing going to teach me something new? Is there something new, either in the content or the skill set or the industry, that's going to teach me something new? And so I really went from packaged goods to financial services to business travel to digital payments. And it's like every single one was so incredibly different. And I think I've become, in some ways, much more of a generalist, which makes me better at a whole bunch of things, but I'm not really deep in one thing. And I think digital has turned into that, as I said, that crossroads where all those things come together. So I think part of it's staying curious. I think part of it's always making sure that that next thing that you do is sort of additive and challenges you to continue to learn and to grow. And I think it's being willing to be like, I'm going to jump in with both feet to something that I haven't done before, and really rely on that core skill set of just good people leadership and being able to hire the right people, being able to develop, skills in my people, and being able to work really effectively with my peers and being strategic. And those four things, I think, were the foundation that let me kind of move from industry to industry and kind of area to area in a way that has ultimately made me more successful.
One of the things that I loved about doing some background research in advance and reading a bit about your story is at one point in an interview you did, you talked about how when you were younger, you were really like thought you'd be a veterinarian because you liked animals, which is so common for especially little like girls, often that's their first kind of foray because
Yeah.
Of the love for animals. But then what I was struck by is you talked about your university experience and that you played soccer like through university, which is amazing. And there's so many, I think, skills that get developed that,
Oh, yeah.
you talk to successful executives. So many of them were part of a team sport or to some other kind of competitive, whether it's in art or music or in sport. So I thought that was fascinating. And then you also talked about your job, like managing the bars on campus.
Yeah.
And it was like, and this happens like even at this level of our careers where I read that and I just immediately related to you. Like I thought in my head, like, oh my goodness, like I know I have a job and I run this other organization, but I had the experience of like, okay, that sounds like something that sounds like me. That sounds like so relatable. And that's the whole part of mentorship, is like getting at those kind of nuggets. But I love your story because you talk about how nonlinear it is, your path, right? It was like, I was here and how it all came together. And I think there's so much anxiety and concern among both, men and women at that stage of their life about not knowing what it is that they're going to do.
I think there's like a big part of it is trusting in the synchronicity of how things happen and not getting too caught up in ego. Cause I feel like there's at least 4 or 5 times in my career where I stepped from a really big job into a small job. And sometimes those are the best times because you suddenly have full latitude to create everything from nothing. And I think people do feel an anxiety around your career has to look a certain way. Like it has to look progressively like it gets bigger. And I'm not sure that's always true. I think as long as you can look at the next thing and say, gosh, I can bring something to that and I can learn something from that. I think having that confidence to let go of other assumptions about what it means is super important for people.
And you talk a lot about the importance of both mentorship and sponsorship, and I would like to hear you talk about what is the difference. What does that look like we all have heard about mentorship, what successful mentorship is, but what is sponsorship? What is that concept, and what does that look like inside of Rogers?
Right. So I quite often say the most important concept I never understood until very late in my career was sponsorship. And the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, a mentor is really part of your brain trust. They could be a peer, they could be somebody that works for you, they could be somebody outside the company that you go to, that you either get advice from because they know more about something than you, or they're just a sounding board. A sponsor, by definition, is somebody who is in the same company as you and they're more senior than you. And they are able to trade their currency to move you ahead in your career, whether that's hiring you into a role or speaking on your behalf in talent assessments, or just being somebody who's supporting you and giving you advice about how to navigate, especially in bigger companies. It's incredibly, incredibly important. And it's a nuance that I think a lot of younger women don't get. And so I remember very powerfully it landing with me when I first heard it, and then starting to think, like, who are my sponsors and how am I more intentional about getting sponsors? Because unlike mentors, you can't just go ask someone to do it. It really is sort of an earned relationship that's usually based on you producing value over time, or and sharing values with some of the people that you might be working for. And then that really becomes sort of the cement that builds that relationship where they start to trade back by giving you opportunities.
And do you actually at a certain point, do you actually have an open conversation with someone who might be your sponsor to ask that, or is it always subtle? Is it always kind of covert?
I think it starts as a subtle thing. Like, so it's sort of like you have to build some foundation to start that is usually based on, as I said, results and values. But then after some point, it becomes sort of obvious, yes, there's an opportunity here. And then I think it becomes a more overt conversation about, both how can I be part of your mission, right? How can I make you more successful? And here's sort of what I would like to achieve, and how can you help me do that? And what would that look like? And then it really does become a mutually ongoing relationship. My sponsor at Amex was a guy named Ed Gilligan, and he was the number 2 guy in the company. And he multiple times stepped in and either took me out of a role and put me in one, or advocated on my behalf. And it just, there is nothing that replaces that, particularly as you get more senior in an organization, because you're not applying for jobs anymore. You are earning your way into the next level.
That is such an important concept, and one that, I speak about mentorship and the advancement of women all the time, and I've never used that word to describe some of the pieces that are needed, right? The direct invitation, onto a board, that kind of person who stands up and says, like, this is happening or else I'm not going to participate, kind of thing. People willing to put their either goodwill or their, as you said, currency on the line for that. I think that's such an important topic to talk more about. And I've actually heard that. That's why, I love that we're associated with Rogers, but I've heard that concept. In fact, I think the first time I heard it was at a Rogers event. I don't know that it was called sponsorship, but it was a senior male executive at Rogers who talked about the importance of men within Rogers taking on that role and really working. I, in my head, was thinking about it as mentorship, but I think the word sponsorship is a much better term for that. So that's excellent. And just shifting back to the pandemic, just for one last question is,
sure.
And around the issue of gender equity. So we know, one of the things that is concerning me the most, and I know, many leaders in the country, is the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women specifically in the workforce, kind of taking a step back. We've heard that it's, we're going back 3 decades, for example, the research is showing. How do you think that, as a leader in this space, one, how do you think that the COVID recovery efforts are going to impact women who are currently studying in this field or moving into working in the field? What do you think is needed for us to catch back up? what do leaders, what do companies, what do governments need to do to like make sure that this disproportionate impact on women is, stopped or reversed. So that's my kind of first question. And then my second part of that is, what advice do you have for women who are coming up and interested in the telecommunications communications technology field? What things should they be thinking about right now? So
Okay.
two-parter.
So I think, what can companies do? I think, I think just embracing diversity and making sure that we are giving the same opportunities to everyone, regardless of race, gender, orientation, any of those things, right? So I think it starts with making sure anytime that you have a job open, or you're looking at people, that you're looking at a slate that represents the population of people that we serve. And I have made that a real practice in my world. In fact, up until this year, I've had a all women leadership team. And I think that's not because I tried to, but because I really made sure every time I had a slate that was at least 50-50. And that's just how it happened. And so I think continuing to be focused on that, and then also continuing to be focused in the same way that we have to understand our customers and design around them. I think we have to design around the needs of our employees. And I think particularly during COVID, it's been hard for women, because I think a lot of them have had to continue to do their day jobs and worry about the kids. And I'm not saying that there aren't men on my team that haven't had to do the same thing, but it has, I think, been harder for them disproportionately. And so we've really tried to strive to make sure that we've given people the flexibility to deal with that, whatever that looks like. Because my child is growing up, but I can't imagine what it would be like to have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old at home while I was trying to do my job. And I think we have to behave in ways that reflect the complexity of people's lives right now and heading into the future. I think my advice for people wanting to get into the telco space, honestly, there's never been an industry I've worked on that I've been more fascinated in, because it really truly is at the heart of everything that's going to change over the next 10 years, whether that's how we commute, or how we manage healthcare, or how we connect and do business. I think what we found during COVID is there's going to be a lot of people who never go back to an office, right? That more and more of what our interaction is going to look like what you and I are doing right now. And so it is a absolutely foundational part of what's going to make Canada successful and competitive in the world. And so I think it's like, don't be shy. It's the place to be. I think it'll be a place where there is tremendous growth and tremendous learning opportunities. And there will be many, many opportunities, because as we sort of figure out, no one knows yet what 5G means, because no one's invented the applications that are going to be the Uber of this generation. But there will be just so much potential. And I think it's just put yourself out there. It is a world that needs women in STEM roles. I think we are a better company for having women in those roles. And I know we for sure are interested in inviting people into that world.
Right. And I think being your message that keeps resonating with me is those other skills. We don't know what that next round of innovation is going to look like, but we know that collaboration and that creativity and empathy are all going to be so critical, along with the tech skills. So what I take from your story and your experience is go out and get those, like go after those other, it doesn't have to look exactly like you think it's going to look, but you're going to get those skills from a whole bunch of different experiences.
Right? Absolutely. And don't be afraid to go and bring your whole self to work, because I actually think that empathy and that willingness to bring people together is helpful in technology, because it can be a very logical field, but I think it's a logical field that benefits a lot from an empathetic or emotional view of what it is you're delivering. So
It was so nice to talk to you today. It was a real pleasure. Thank
It
you
was
for sharing your story.
it was lovely talking to you too.
Okay, well, all the best, and we will talk very soon. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.